Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Made it to the end of another week, and I think it's time for me to be a little fair and balanced around here because obviously, when PFF decides to say something good about the Seahawks, I should probably talk about it too. I shouldn't only talk about it when they don't like us, when they're negative about us, when they're pessimistic about us. We got to talk about the good stuff too. So, PFF, few days after they posted the rankings of offensive lines in the NFL and had the Seahawks third to last, which for reasons I went into in my last video, I thought was a little ridiculous, and it didn't really make sense to me, the assumptions they were making. They did post this receiver corp rankings. Now, before I go through the rankings here, understand that this is not just wide receivers. This is wide receivers plus tight ends plus running backs that are prolific pass catchers. This is anybody who catches the ball in an NFL offense. So that's going to put some teams at an advantage. Like if you have Travis Kelce, if you have George Kittle, if you have Austin Eckler, that's going to give you a big leg up that other teams don't have here because even though you may not have the greatest receivers, some of those teams don't, but you're making up for it in other ways. So this is all pass catchers. So PFF ranked every team's receiving corp from 1 to 32, and the Seahawks did very well here. So I don't think this should surprise anybody. I've talked at length about how our collection of skill players on offense is right up there with the best teams in the league, and this ranking kind of backs up what I'm seeing here. So let's just talk about these guys as pass catchers. And I'll use it to kind of highlight, in contrast with the video I made a couple days ago, what this is indicating. So obviously the Bengals are number one, and that's absolutely correct. It's right now, at least, right? They've got three receivers, wide receivers, that are basically number one receivers. Chase, Higgins, Boyd. They've all proven they can be basically number one receivers. And then they've got fun depth with guys like Charlie Jones and Yoshivas. They've got Joe Mixon for the moment. Apparently they're going to release him eventually, but he's a good pass catching back. They've also got Irv Smith Jr., a decent tight end. But you put that all together, I think it's pretty clearly the Bengals have the best pass catchers in the league. Then you have the Eagles because of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert as well. They're number two. Miami is number three, basically on the back of Hill and Waddle alone, although Cedric Wilson's not bad. San Fran has Debo and Ayuk, and then Kittle and McCaffrey, and those two guys put them way over the edge. And then you've got the Seahawks. So the Seahawks did a lot better on this PFF ranking. They are top five. And if you read the blurb from PFF, they basically got to top five purely on the back of their receivers, it looks like, because they didn't mention anything else. Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN. No mention of any of the tight ends or running backs. And that's relatively fair. Like, if you take a look at some of the tight ends they did mention here, you got guys like George Kittle. You got guys like Dallas Goedert. These are the tight ends that are considered to be the best of the best in the league. The Seahawks, I will say this. You look at their tight ends, obviously you don't have a superstar. Your best tight end is Noah Fant. And Fant, in this offense, is somebody who you look at and you go, okay, he's going to catch 3 to 4 balls a week on average. Maybe twice a year he'll blow up and have a huge game and be maybe even your leading receiver. But he's obviously not going to put up the numbers of the elite tight ends. He's got the talent. If you put him in a different offense that maybe didn't really have good receivers, or maybe had a really young quarterback that was scared to throw the ball downfield and just wanted to check it down to his tight end, okay, then you're talking. Maybe then Noah Fant could put up close to elite numbers. I don't know if he'd get all the way up there. But you take a look at what we have in our tight end room in terms of depth, I feel like it does get slept on a little bit. We have 3 tight ends on this roster who have proven they're not great, but they've proven they can be positive parts of an offense. They can be meaningful parts of an offense. How many other teams in the NFL have that? 3 tight ends that have proven they can be positive contributors in a meaningful role in an offense. I think Dallas probably had that last year, but then they lost Dalton Schultz. So there are only a couple other teams that have that. And then you have our running back room, and you can see also the Seahawks did not get any of their running backs individually shouted out in this section, which is fair because while Kenneth Walker can probably be a good pass catcher, he hasn't done it yet. In college, he wasn't a big time pass catcher, and in 1 year in the NFL, he was okay. He was decent, but wasn't a prolific pass catcher. Now, I will say this: you've got two running backs coming in as rookies who were very prolific pass catchers in college. UCLA featured Charbonnet as a check down back a lot, a safety valve. He caught 60 passes, I think, the last 2 years. And then you had McIntosh, who was a legitimate wide receiver at times. He lines up at receiver, he runs real routes, and he catches passes. He's not just a check down guy. So while these guys may not be worth mentioning yet, you can definitely see how they can easily get there. So you take a look at this ranking, you take a look at the teams that are ahead of us, you see that there are only a few, and then you see that we're sitting relatively nice here at number 5. And you can also see that there's probably some room for us to move up here, especially if at least one, if not both of the guys that I just mentioned, Charbonnet and McIntosh, end up being meaningful parts of the offense this year, catching passes, which was a big part of what they did well in college. You could see them bumping up a spot or two easily, right? Like, you take a look at the Dolphins. You've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and those guys are crazy productive. Last year, their production was so good, I completely understand that those two guys alone put them at number 3, which is basically what the PFF write-up says. But there's not a whole lot else other than those two guys. Cedric Wilson's nice, but he's not one of the best slot receivers in this league, and he probably benefits a lot from Hill and Waddle. And they lost Mike Gesicki, so they don't have a big-time tight end at this moment. So you can easily see how we could jump them. You take a look at a situation like the Eagles. They've got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and then they've got Quez Watkins is kind of okay, but there isn't a heck of a lot going on behind Smith and Brown. And then Goddard, like, is he as good as Travis Kelce? I know PFF thinks he's about as good as guys like Kelce and Kittle, but I don't know. So you can see where there's an opportunity for us to maybe move up. Now, I don't know about, like Debo did not really have a very good year last year, but I don't think that defines who he is as a player. McCaffrey can obviously, it's a game-to-game proposition with a guy like McCaffrey, whether or not he's going to get hurt. And that may not be the case for some of the guys that we have. We'll have to see. But you can see where this could even get a little bit better very easily. We've got some guys that just need to go out there and prove it. We've got some guys who can really move the needle here, maybe pushing us up as high as top 3. I mean, to me, in my opinion, the Seahawks have the second best receiver room in the NFL, and that's entirely done on the strength of their top 3 guys. We don't really have much going on behind those 3 guys. We got guys who are interesting, but we've got guys who haven't done anything yet. You've got guys like Eskridge, who I think most people are kind of done with. You've got Cade Johnson. You've got Derek Young. You've got Matt Landers. Like, these guys are interesting, but they haven't done it yet. If one of those guys steps up and becomes even a guy who catches like 300 yards worth of receiving over the course of a 17-game season as your number 4 receiver and maybe provides something different for your offense like Derek Young, then boom, suddenly that's got to move the needle in your favor when you're comparing them to other receiver rooms that are less deep. So this could get better too. And you combine these pass catchers with, okay, so we've established the Seahawks pass catchers are top 5. I think top 5 at least. I think this ranking is fair right now. As of right now, this is probably about where I'd put us. And then you take a look at our running back stable, which I've already kind of broken down and talked about what we have in K9, Charbonnet, Dallas, and McIntosh. And I think it's probably top 8 in the NFL. We got a top 8 running back room right now. I don't think it's elite. Like, there are a couple teams that are clearly better. But we do have a good top end in our running back stable. And we also have quality depth, I believe. Some of these guys have to go out and prove they can be that quality depth, but based on what they did in college and based on what the expectation is, I think it's fair. And you put all that together with the offensive line, which I already spoke about a couple days ago. And this is as good a situation for a quarterback and a play caller to find themselves in, right? I've kind of talked about this before, but you've got Geno Smith. We all know that Geno Smith is not as good as Pat Mahomes. He's not as good as Joe Burrow. He's not as good as those guys. But you're putting him in this situation where he's got these pass catchers, which, like I said, are top five minimum. He's got running backs that, if you're just looking at their ability to run the football, I still think you're probably looking at something like top eight when you consider their top end ability, because K9 is moving towards becoming an elite running back. And you've also got Charbonnet, who was the third best running back in the draft last year. And I think it's top eight as far as running backs go in this league, just in terms of their running ability. And if I'm right about the offensive line, and I do think that I am, which is to kind of summarize my belief, I don't see how they get worse. That's almost impossible. Like, that would require guys like Cross to regress when he was a 21-year-old rookie last year. It would require Abraham Lucas to regress when he was a 23-year-old rookie last year. These things just don't happen that often. It would require Damian Lewis to regress even though he's in a contract year, and his future earnings will be determined by how well he plays in 2023. It would require Evan Brown to become one of the worst centers in the league. He'd have to be as bad as Austin Blythe was last year, which is almost impossible. And it wouldn't be consistent with what Evan Brown has been as a center so far in his career. So if I'm right about this offensive line, and it's basically impossible for them to be any worse than like the 20th best offensive line in the league, what a dream situation. Geno Smith, I've said this before, I'll say it again. He has a contract where nothing is guaranteed. He doesn't have a good season this year, and the team decides, you know what, let's go a different way. We would presumably have at that point a pretty good draft pick if Geno doesn't have a good year. It's a good rookie QB class, a lot of guys we could pick. Geno is due only like half of his money if we cut him now. They could do that. If he doesn't play well, that's on the table. This is not a situation where we're completely stuck to him and there's nothing we can do about it for a few years because the dead money would be too much. No. So we're putting Geno in this great situation, but we've also hedged our bet. If he doesn't take advantage of that really good situation, then it could be a thing where we do move off of him and start trying to find our quarterback of the future. And if he doesn't play well, if I'm right about all this, and he's going to have elite pass catchers, great runners, and at worst, I'm going to say at worst, a below average offensive line. I don't see how this offensive line is bad, short of injuries, and injuries can happen to anybody. Then he probably doesn't deserve to be brought back in 2024. So if that's how this goes, I get it. Like, I like Geno. I really liked what he did last year. I thought he played great. I think a lot of people are underrating how good he is. But if he doesn't play well next year in this really good situation for a quarterback, then I can flip really quickly. I can move on very quickly. So that's the Geno side of it. There's also the Shane Waldron side of it, right? Like, I've talked about this before, but it deserves reiterating. He is in a very good situation right here. About the worst you can say about his situation right now as an offensive coordinator and play caller on the Seahawks is our left guard doesn't really have the mobility to do all the things he probably wants him to be able to do. But other than that, we have given him mostly really good pieces to work with, not only in general, but also for his offensive style specifically. So if he doesn't do well this year, then that could also be a situation where, hey, we gave them everything they could ever ask for, and they still weren't able to get it done. We got to move on. Of course, if he does really well, he might move on anyway because he'll be getting a head coaching job somewhere. That's always on the table. But we would obviously much prefer that to us having to fire him because he didn't do well. So I've talked about this before, like I said, but I felt like it deserved reiterating in light of PFF's, I think, accurate ranking and the fact that there is upside here for us to be even better than this. So I agree with their take on our pass catchers. I don't see their take on our offensive line at all. And you put it all together, this season needs to be really good on the offensive side of the ball. See you guys later. Go Hawks.